Greetings and welcome to the Superb Diamond Range Show. This is episode 44. As part of the financial series, we're doing an interview with the Millionaire Educator, Ed Mills. I'm just going to do a brief financial disclaimer. We are not financial advisors. The content on this podcast and YouTube videos are for educational purposes only and merely cite our own personal opinions. In order to make the best financial decision that suits your own needs, you must conduct your own research and seek the advice of a licensed financial advisor if necessary. Know that all investments involve some form of risk and there is no guarantee that you will be successful in making, saving or investing money, nor is there any guarantee that you won't experience any loss when investing. Always remember to make smart decisions and do your own research. So today's guest is somebody that I'm pretty familiar with in that I've checked out many podcasts of and checked out his own sort of website, and it's the Millionaire Educator in Ed Mills, and it's just a kind of story that I think is really interesting about sort of investing for retirement or early retirement, and particularly doing it as a teacher on a teacher's salary. So anyway, I'll just introduce you there, Ed, or Jerry. Welcome to the show.
Well, Stephen, thanks for having me. I listened to some of your podcasts before, and I'm honored to be here. You've had some really interesting guests before.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much.
I was going to say that I noticed you had Lars on before, Kreuger, and I'm kind of the other end of the spectrum as far as I pulled up his credentials, thought, wow, MBA, Harvard, magna cum laude, very impressive guest. So I guess if you're not an MBA from Harvard, you might want to listen to some of the things I've done. So let me just start by saying that, like you just said, I'm a public school teacher. I teach Spanish and English as a second language. I'm also a basketball coach. I'm 56 years old. Been married for 23 years, and we have a 14-year-old son. My financial background is very unimpressive up until a certain point. I pretty much floundered after college. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. My undergraduate degree was in history, and I played basketball 2 years, one in Argentina and one in El Salvador, and learned a little Spanish. And then around the age of 27, I became a public school Spanish teacher. Back then, around 1992, there was quite a bit of shortages for foreign language instructors, particularly in the South. And a strange twist of fate, I became a Spanish teacher. And you didn't get paid a lot of money back then. I think I made $18,000 my first year. I got my certification in order, and I made, I think, $24,000 around 1994. Eventually, I decided, well, there's not a lot of money in teaching, and I just went on and got my MBA, not at Harvard, at Texas A&M International in Laredo, Texas, and I did some more graduate study. But essentially, after grad school, my wife and I, who also did an MBA, we were $45,000 in debt. And I didn't really know what to do because I never had any debt in my life. I never had anything, one way or another. And I landed an ESL job teaching in Saudi Arabia. And that's where I dug out of the hole, got up to $0 net worth. And then I stayed until about 2001. And we got up to $100,000.
Wow!
And so what a great feeling. I felt like might as well have been $100 billion to me at that point, because when you've never had anything, if you just have two nickels to rub together, it's a great feeling. So, but that's when I came back to the States and became a public school teacher again, and that's when most people pick up my story and know what I've done.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating because there's that general belief that obviously teachers, never know how to sort of manage their money or maybe do as well as they could do. So it's a really great to hear that story and sort of encourage people that are teachers and just people in general how to kind of, how it can be done, basically, just sort of showing the blueprint, really, how to do it.
Yeah, and I got back to the States about 2002, and I want everybody to understand that, I didn't work the plan perfectly starting then either. In hindsight, there are many missteps that I committed. And this is pre-FIRE movement and, financial independence. So
It's
really,
yeah,
we didn't really have people to like read their stories. And that's probably why I'm so open about what I've done. In 2002, I started a public school in Georgia again. And from there, I learned about retirement plans that teachers have. And even though teachers don't make necessarily the highest salaries, we have a lot of retirement plans.
Yeah, totally.
We have a pension, and we also have equivalent of two 401k plans with two limits. So teachers can save, ironically, twice of what someone in a business setting would be able to save. So
incredible. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. So, and, since I did have some business classes, did my MBA, even though I'd never really used it at that point, I thought, well, how can I make this, I need to start saving because I was used to saving after my Saudi experience. And so my wife and I funded our 403B and our IRAs for 7 years. And, I always tell people I don't recall ever taking a vow of poverty just because I entered the teaching profession.
Yeah.
But I realized pretty quick none of my coworkers were really using these accounts because they're just viewing their pension as their future income stream. So, but in about seven years, we got to about $450,000, I think.
That sorry, I just wanted to just add there that not just in the teaching profession, but I work in sort of finance, in pensions, and quite a few of my colleagues have no real interest in like the pension itself or sort of like investing or anything like that. And I sometimes talk about it, and you've kind of really got to be into it in a way. In some ways, like some people just never really talk about it or have an interest. So it's kind of good when you figure it out or whenever you have a plan, but it's not for everyone really. But
well, I'm sure you've had the experience of trying to spread the message with your zeal, and no one seems receptive.
So difficult.
I've tried to dial it back, and I just try to live the example. And if people want to come to me and ask, I'm always willing to help them.
That's brilliant. That's great. That's the way to do it, to be honest.
Yes. Then I guess our story, I'll pick up around, we did our 7 years and we got to 450, but I realized that we could probably optimize our savings even more aggressively. And so I came up with a better plan. And essentially what I did is I quit my job so I could throttle down the savings. I was able to access some previous money without tax penalty. And that's what my wife and I did. And then we maxed out every account available to us. So to give you an example, 2010 to 2012, we saved over $260,000.
Wow.
Because, we had money to live on from the previous savings. So we just maxed those out, those savings buckets. And then we took a year off and traveled. And then we came back and did 2 more years, and we did 246 in 2 years. And then we took 2 years off, and now here I am back at probably my favorite job I've ever had in South Georgia, Eccles County. And we're in our year 2. We've saved I don't know what, 100, and thus far we've saved $200,000 more or less in 2 years because we're older and we have higher savings contribution limits. So
I've heard that similar over here, like where you can put more in, sort of if you leave it too late, that type of thing, you get a bigger allowance. That's pretty cool. Like,
Yeah, I mean, anytime you tell me I'm allowed to save more, I'll always shoot for that target. Um, so, I mean, regardless of where you are, I guess the thing that um, anyone can use here is that I kind of view work at this point, since I have funds to pull from and live off, and we do live frugally. We're not real wasteful with money, but I know why I go to work. We go to work basically to save money for ourselves and our family. And, most people that I know are in debt, and they go to work for the bank, the credit card company, Mr. Mortgage.
Absolutely.
I've just kind of flipped all that on its head and said, nope, I go to work for me, and I end up paying tax at the end of the year, but just not a whole lot. And I feel like I'm in control because I keep my eye on, tax obligations. And so that's essentially our story. We're hardcore savers. We're always trying to put money on our side of the ledger. And, as I sit right now, I think our net worth is inching up on $1.6 million.
Excellent.
Right. And if you would have told me that, and I'm not young, I'm 56. And when I got back to the States that second time, I was 38. So, had I done it perfectly, I probably have a lot more money. But you don't have to do things perfectly. If you save money and you invest imprudently, it leads to pretty good results. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably the most important thing is maybe just to get started, to do something, because obviously a lot of people delay things. I mean, going back to colleagues at my workplace, a lot of the time they might talk about, they might start saving when they start increasing their pay, or if they get a new job, because they kind of feel that whatever they're earning just now is not enough to kind of save. And obviously it's important to create the savings habit. It's really important.
Right. And even if you don't have a lot of money to save it, I recommend that people do it just so they can kind of experience the volatility
Absolutely.
of a stock portfolio or mutual fund portfolio. Because the first time I ever experienced that, boy, I think it was 2008 when the market dipped here.
Wow.
And I saw $60,000 just on paper vanish, in a sense. But
wow.
you want to be used to that market turmoil, because I haven't sold, and it's worked out great. And I'm very aware that it can take a dip again, but I'm not going to sell.
That's great. It's important to kind of go through that and learn that and have the right sort of temperament sort of in that situation.
Well, and those accounts can also build, a lot of people are paying debt, but I kind of view a retirement account or a brokerage fund account as a morale account. You see, even though a lot of your money's probably paying a mortgage or whatnot, you do see your little pot of money kind of chugging along.
Absolutely.
And, it
might be a little sort of.
Yeah, a little mind game you play with yourself, but it works.
It's brilliant. Yeah, I think as you say, it's important just to get started and to experience what it's like to be invested in the markets, and to kind of like stick to it as well. Just not because you will get people that will do it for a little while and just sort of want to stop or want to come out and do something else, and it's important to be like consistent as well.
Yeah, well, humans, we're not really hardwired for volatility and risk. I mean, that's why we have pensions, right? If it was easy to do, everyone would just, have a portfolio they lived off of. But, and be aware that when there are those inevitable dips, there's always a whole industry out there ready to come prey on your fear and promise that they're going to take care of all those worrisome, dips. But what they never seem to mention, or they seem to obfuscate, is the cost. And, that's what I'm seeing here in the States. Financial services, you can pay a lot of money in fees.
Definitely.
And the disclosure is non-existent from what I see. I mean, if you want to go dig through a prospectus, you might be able to find it. But so, the sooner you learn to, more enough about investments to feel comfortable, and you get used to kind of investing and putting up with some of the the gyrations of the market, the better off you'll be in the long run. And it won't be a smooth ride, but I highly recommend it.
Just sort of to mention about the fees and so on and so forth. I had a sort of like an old work colleague that their husband was sort of like looking at options for his pension, and he just wanted some advice. And I just explained I wasn't able to give advice, but what I think they were thinking about doing was they had an old workplace pension that they were looking at kind of like investing for another 10 years rather than taking it. And they were looking to move it away from the work plan. And basically, through his wife's work, there was like a financial company that basically offer advice for free for employees of that company. And they kind of like convinced them to go from a plan that had reasonably low fees to one that was like 2%. And, you know, the saying that they had was like, oh, we'll look after it. I know it's 2%, but we'll manage it well for you. And it was pretty major, you know, like the difference in probably what they were paying if they just left things how they were, without even moving it to like, you know, Vanguard or something, you know. So it just sort of shows you that, you know, when they meet with somebody that they think's professional, they, you know, think that they're doing the right thing, but it's not always the case. And of course, I couldn't tell them any better because I just wasn't in a position. It was their decision, really, at the end of the day. But
right. Well, and you would think here that, you know, with Vanguard and other low-cost options in America being so prominent and common, that teacher retirement plans would be, you know, pretty good. But the reality is they're probably the worst retirement plans in the United States. And I'm not talking about pensions. I'm talking about 403Bs and many times the 457 because they use variable annuity products where the average fee in America is 2.25%.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, that's like, I always tell people, you know, Michael Phelps is a good swimmer, but if you put an anchor around his neck and a metal chain, I'll swim laps around him in the pool.
Wow.
You know, that's essentially what you have. You have a leak in your ship and you're going down.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it.
But, you know, but as we said earlier, a lot of teachers, and I explained this to them, they're just not very interested. So I just become the crazy man in the teacher's lounge, howling at the moon about fees.
I mean, that sort of in the UK, there's like we have like a lot of comparison websites. I'm sure you probably have them in the States where, you know, you can get cheaper, say, car insurance or cheaper home insurance, and you can compare the market. And, you know, people do that all the time, but they never really think about investing and how they can save money or if there's an option. Another thing that I find as well is like people will have many jobs. And in terms of sort of tracking their previous pensions, no one really has an interest in doing it. So they could have built up quite a few pots, but when the day comes when they need to kind of like, you know, figure them all out, you know, instead of maybe moving it all to like one place or having what we call like a self-invested personal pension where you kind of move, you know, consolidate a lot of your pots into one place. So it's easier to kind of keep track of. And obviously, as you say, getting the fees down. You know, nobody really thinks about that, and it's I just kind of think, well, if you're not thinking about it now when you're, you know, young and organized, I guess, you know, as you get older it's going to be tougher to remember and, you know, to get it organized. Yeah,
I mean, that sounds like a rollover IRA, what you just described.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can get it to greener pastures that are more cost effective. And if people are wondering, you know, well, give you a quick example. Let's just say the market return over a period of time is 6% and you're paying 2% in fees. Well, you put up 100% of the money, you bear 100% of the risk, and you're making off with 2/3 of the return. But the longer you hold that, it's a bigger drag on your net worth or the value of that portfolio. So just remember that, you know, 2/6 is 1/3. You have a silent partner in your retirement who puts up no money.
Because I recall in some of your other interviews that you've done on podcasts where you mention about kind of like a break of service in order to sort of move the money to a more favourable place, like Vanguard say. But over here, it can be the case where you can do partial transfers if the workplace pension allows you to. But obviously, there are some where obviously they match money. And basically what can happen is they might, if you try to do a transfer, they could opt you out completely. So you're missing out on the match, basically, and that could take 2 or 3 months, and then you'd have to rejoin the scheme. So I just kind of wanted to go into that a little bit, where you've got, I think you've referred to it as having your eye on the door, sort of.
Yeah, I've had some good jobs that I've quit just to move my money. Yeah, you always got to have an exit plan, because when you start getting, $100, $150, $200,000 sitting in a plan that has, generally I just park that money in a fixed account, so it's getting maybe 2% a year. So I'm taking my chances with inflation there. And the investment platform in my opinion, is too expensive to invest through, because I always try to avoid fee certainty coupled with market uncertainty. I don't like that combination. So, at a certain point, I'm always looking to what they call separate service, so I can roll my money to my rollover IRA, which is an account where I get to pick. And of course, I pick something that's low cost. And in my case, it's at Vanguard here in the United States. It gives me a lot of control. Sometimes I don't really necessarily want to leave those jobs because I do like it there. But, these retirement plans aren't looking out for me. I kind of view them as they're not really designed for the participant.
Yeah.
They're designed to, over time, convert the client's wealth into their wealth. And that's a very cynical view, I realize. But I'm so glad I left those jobs, because I'm in charge of my money. And as far as I know, my wife and I are like the only people who have been using those plans and building wealth with them. Everyone seems to complain always about how their plan doesn't seem to really match the market. What they don't understand is the fee drag, because the disclosure is just not there.
Absolutely.
They can't quite put their finger on it. It's mystifying. So, it's pretty simple math when you get down to it. But I don't know. In some ways, it's very ingenious, the system that's been set up here by for lack of a better term, the financial services insurance industrial complex.
Absolutely.
You always hear the example, you don't want to sell the steak, you want to sell the sizzle. Well, we've got the sizzle. We don't have the steak,
Brilliant.
And I think J.L. Collins said it another way. He said, if you pour the beer, you don't want them to get the beer. You just want them to have a little taste of the froth. Well, I feel like that's what we get here. We get the froth and the sizzle. So that's why I separate service, i.e. quit my job so I can move my money to benefit me.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so sort of brave as well, because obviously there'll be people that get very comfortable in their jobs and they kind of don't want to leave. But, obviously looking at the bigger picture, as you say, the goal and, in terms of saving money, it makes sense to do that, because obviously it's going to, save you on fees, and in the long term, it's going to, lead to better results.
So I've always been pretty adventurous. I mean, to give you an example, I one time went to Brazil for 3 months with a carry-on bag and a guidebook. Didn't know anybody, and that's how I learned Portuguese. I just hit the ground running. And but I've met Brits and Scotsmen all over the world. I could see some guys doing that, taking a year holiday, and then you jump back in the workforce. It's doable, I would imagine. But you're right. People get comfortable in their jobs and they can't imagine ever doing anything else. But sometimes, as they say, the discomfort's where the reward is. And
Definitely.
I've gotten to see parts of Georgia, my state, just because I've gone to other parts and work now. And I view every 2 or 3 year stint as an adventure. You don't have to go stay somewhere forever. If you go there and you save all your money 2 years and you save a lot of money, you're ready to go take another adventure. And then you can, go to your plan B, C, D. I prefer it that way. I'm not in the States, you work 30 years for your teaching pension. And I knew early on I couldn't do 30 straight years. I don't have that mental stamina to do that. I like to go out and see the world and goof off. I still got a lot of that in me.
Yeah, and I think for the mind as well, it's good to like explore and adventure. And sometimes people might want to save that up, or some people might want to do it every so often. And I think it's important to travel, for the experience and the adventure, as you say, just sort of getting out of your own country and experiencing a different culture.
We the 2017-18 school year, we lived in Mexico, and our son went to a little private bilingual school and married in Mexico. And and my wife and I, we didn't work. We just took it easy and recharged our batteries. But it was a great experience because, he's got something to compare his existence here in the U.S. with. And I look at my own case, having been in El Salvador during some tough times, and I've been to India. It's kind of hard to bellyache here in America, when you've seen other places in the world, and you know what a tough life could be. And, a lot of people here in the States and in the West in general, they're not very aware of what they actually have compared to the rest of the world. Absolutely. And I was like that at one point, but I'm not like that anymore. I thank God that I have what I have. I have a high sense of gratitude because a lot of parts of the world, it can be tough, very tough every day. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you got to sort of make the most of the opportunity that we're given. And, as you say, it does, you do have to look into everything and kind of like do a bit of reading or research on, what's available. And it's sort of a shame that other people, maybe not thinking about these kind of things, or, they sort of think that it's somehow going to take care of itself, but you do need to kind of be involved, and you do need to kind of, learn these things. And as you say, it's difficult to like talk to people, maybe trying to convince them to take an interest in it, because it's almost like they don't think that it matters. And, but it is important. Like,
well, we were talking earlier about, someone who doesn't have a lot of money yet and trying to save. I'm very aware of the people that are, say, in the middle or toward the end of their career, and their money's actually pretty good, but they don't realize what they have. That they're at a spot right then where they could rev up their savings, something similar to what my wife and I have done. You don't have to go for $130,000 a year, but how about 20, 30, 40,000? But they're just quick to dismiss that because they've never done it. They have no experience saving, and they don't realize that they're sitting on a prime opportunity that 99% of the world would love to be in that situation. They don't realize what they have, is what I'm saying. So, yeah, I try to think all the time how I can reach people with that message, and I hope this struck somebody right now. But when you have the opportunity, you got to make it count, and that's kind of why. This job I'm in now, my wife and I, we didn't have to come back and work. But I told her, I said, well, if we do this, we can, in 2019, go well over 125 saved in a year. She said, okay, let's do that, and I'm real big on living the example, because it's easy to talk about things, but when you do it, that kind of gets people's attention. And, doing the, quote, impossible, well, it's not actually impossible, and I do this, and being a basketball coach, I also try to model for the players. I jog every day, even though I'm an old guy and I'm not real fast, but I've got 1,300 days of jogging without a miss.
Brilliant.
I do 50 push-ups a day. I lift weights with them, and they're like, "How old are you, Coach?" I'm like, "I'm 56," and they just because in their mind I'm just supposed to like roll over and die, But you got to do that, So
Yeah, I
there's
would say just to add to that. I mean, I've been quite into like trying to stay fit, and like a thing over here that happens quite a lot. Like lately, there's been not the best of weather, and I've said to myself, I'm not going to make excuses about the weather. I'm just going to go out and do what I've got to do in the time that I've got. So if it means going out for a jog very early morning and the weather's not great, I'm not going to use that as an excuse. And again, everybody I speak to at work's like, oh, I didn't do anything because the weather, and I'll do it next week, and you're just putting it off, and you just kind of get into become lazy basically, because obviously if you keep doing it, you get into the habit of it, similar to saving, I guess. But it's important to kind of like push yourself, sort of, when you don't think you can do it, just to do it, because obviously it's good for the you feel much better, you feel stronger, you can tackle anything almost, like.
Yeah, well, and that was the thing. At some point I was looking at my contemporaries on Facebook. I noticed how big so many of my buddies were getting, and I started jogging again. And how that as you jog and you stop, it's when you start back to jogging, it's just brutal, but you can't fake jogging. And anyway, I realized what I needed to do is have a minimal goal every day. And I that's why I use this. I don't know if you've seen on Twitter, I refer to it as streaking to glory. I keep my streak, and there's been many a day I didn't want to jog, but the fact I don't want to break my streak
That's brilliant.
Gets my lazy butt to put on my shoes and go do it. Even if it's just 12 minutes, that's the minimum jog I will accept. And the minimum push-ups I will do is 50. But 50, I might do 20, 15, and 15. But I know I did it. And then it's the psychology behind that. And I'll give you an example. This morning, I woke up and I thought, did I run yesterday? I don't recall jogging. and then I had like this panic. I thought, oh my gosh, my streak is done. And I realized, no, I did, because I dropped my wife off early morning field trip, and I went and did it after that. And I could barely remember it, but it's intact. That's the good news. And I was like, yes, I live to fight another day.
In terms of like investing in the United States, I know that obviously you're a big fan, like most of us over here, of Vanguard. What sort of funds do you tend to like be drawn to or invest in?
Yeah, for the longest time I was just using a target retirement fund, which I like things that are what I call idiot proof. You could steer anyone to, say, a target retirement fund or a life strategies fund. I'm familiar with those.
Yeah, we have those. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good because the asset allocation remains the same, and I feel that's a good recommendation for a novice investor. But I switched to a pretty much 100% total stock market portfolio, and the reason for that is I realized that my wife and I, with our pension we're going to get, and we're going to make probably about combined $50,000 to $55,000 a year. I view that as my bond portfolio. I also have, down the road, I don't know what it's going to be, but Social Security will be there to provide some, safety net. So I'm aggressive in my, I wouldn't say super aggressive, it's just the total stock market.
Yeah.
I don't have, and I'm going to probably add a little international stock market, but I read, Simple Path to Wealth, and I realized that, the total stock market, what was it, about 49%, I believe he wrote, Mr. Collins, that their revenue comes from overseas.
That's right. Yeah.
So I can live with that. I'm probably going to maybe add 10% international stock along the way here. I'm not going to get any bond, but bear in mind, I don't plan on revving up my lifestyle. I live in a low-cost home that I paid $70,000 for it. I've got a paid-off car. For traveling, I use a lot of travel reward stuff. We eat out occasionally, but we do a lot of cooking at home. So my lifestyle doesn't cost a lot, but my lifestyle is just flat out awesome. I love the life that we have here.
Brilliant.
But if, maybe I would need more steady portfolio or more income if I was living off $80,000 to $100,000 a year. I don't plan on doing that. What I do plan on doing, though, at some point is just having capital gains and dividends, deposited to my bank account. And I'll pull from the shares as needed, hopefully sporadically. Down the road, I don't know what I'm going to do with this money, I guess I'll try to seed some future generations with some legacy wealth. But, money is a tricky thing, right? I mean, you just don't want to give it to people because if they have bad habits, it's just going to compound them.
Absolutely.
And you don't want to take away people's work ethic. So I'm still trying to figure that out going down the road. But as far as my investing, I'm pretty much VTSAX, like many people in the financial independence community.
Yeah, because in UK, obviously it being a lot smaller than the US, we tend to sort of like be invested in like a global fund. So one of the pretty popular ones would be like the Vanguard VWRL or the Vanguard FTSE Global All Cap, which, is sort of split. I think it's got about 60% US. It's got a small amount of UK in it, about 6%. It kind of mirrors the global GDP. But it's it's kind of how we do it. But yeah, I think if I lived in America, I'd probably be into the VTSAX. It seems like a really, really good one, and it's very low cost. And but as you say, the kind of like target date retirements are pretty impressive too, because they kind of do everything for you, and it's kind of set and forget. So it's pretty cool. Yeah,
it's got the financial advice just baked right into the recipe. That's what I always. I mean, how do you top that for someone that has no clue? Ask them, well, what year do you think you're going to retire? And most people can tell you that, and take it from there.
Absolutely.
And, I was looking earlier, the institutional shares in those Vanguard retirement funds, they're like 9 basis points in fees. 9.
It's amazing.
Yeah, isn't it? And here in the States, the life strategies are like 14 to 16 basis points. And, that compared to 2%, 0.09%, wow, it's a no-brainer for me, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, you can't beat it really. And just so you're sort of up to speed, in the UK, like we've had Vanguard here for a little while that offered like an ISA, which is like an after-tax savings account. So we call it like a stocks and shares ISA.
Okay.
But recently Vanguard have brought out a self-invested personal pension. Just came out a few days ago. So I'm pretty sure there'll be plenty of people looking to kind of move pensions over to Vanguard. But it's quite funny because sometimes going directly to Vanguard over here doesn't always work out the cheapest. Sometimes there's like brokers that you can use, like I'll just throw out a few names like AJ Bell or Halifax, where you could kind of like buy Vanguard a lot cheaper, depending on, if you're looking for a percentage based deal or if you're looking for a fixed rate deal. So it's quite different, but we know that the Vanguard's like the right place. It seems to be like very low cost and very good like company to put your money with. So it's definitely really popular over here as it is in the States.
Well, and what I'm noticing now is places like, Schwab and Fidelity and Ameritrade, they have really stepped up their low cost game because people just got tired of watching everyone go to Vanguard. And I have a health savings account that with Fidelity, and I've got their new zero fee index fund. It doesn't quite replicate the total U.S. stock market, but it's close enough for me. And 0% basis points. I don't know how they plan on making money off that down the line. I guess they're going to try to sell me a service. But, that wouldn't happen without Vanguard and God bless him, John Bogle,
Absolutely.
Founding Vanguard. And I see why a lot of the people in the industry just they didn't like Bogle because, he called them out on their fees, and But I'm so that guy's one of my heroes. He was a great man, and I explain to my students, he could have been a billionaire many times over, but he chose to make millions of people millionaires.
Brilliant.
And for that, I'm thankful.
In terms of obviously the tax advantages of obviously saving into a pension, obviously I discovered ages ago, around about the same time that I started coming across some of your interviews, where I downloaded a salary calculator, or we call it a UK salary calculator, where you can kind of put in a certain percentage of your contribution of your work pay to determine how much your tax and what we call national insurance, how the difference it would make. And I remember playing around with the numbers and being like, whoa, something's changed there. And I kind of realized, oh, look, I'm not paying as much tax. So yeah, I just wanted you to sort of go into a little bit of the tax advantages of obviously saving into a pension or a 401k, as you guys call it.
Yes, it's almost magical because, well, in the case this past year, my wife and I put $100,000 in the 403b and the 457. Well, let's say our combined income was $140,000, $140,000 from our jobs. Well, in the eyes of the government, we've gone from $140,000 to $40,000. Okay. Well, that brought us down from, I think we would have been in the 22% tax bracket. Well, that brought us down to I think we're still in the 10% at that point. But with our child, we get a tax credit for having a son. We didn't owe anything on that. All right. We also were able to further lower our tax liability by adding to our individual retirement accounts, our IRAs, and that took another $14,000. So wow. Now that 140 has gone from 40 now down to 26. And then we also did $8,000 to our health saving account. So now we're what is that? We went from 140 to 18,000. So our taxable income was just it plummeted because it's, people say, should I save my money in a brokerage account, in a taxable account, or use my retirement accounts? I'm always for pre-tax accounts, your retirement accounts, because of the tax advantage they give you. You've heard me use the phrase, it puts money on my side of the ledger.
Absolutely.
If I take my paycheck and try to put it in the bank or a brokerage account, I have to let Uncle Sam, Mr. Social Security, Mr. Medicare, and Mr. Peach State, Mr. Georgia State Income Tax, those four entities get a run at my paycheck before I do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, when I go to a retirement account, my Social Security and Medicare have first dibs, but the federal income tax and state income tax get a stiff arm. Now, they're going to get some money, but they're not first in line. I tell them, get your sorry butts to the back of the line. But it's and some people, they feel bad about this. Like, well, it's my duty to pay tax. Trust me, you're going to pay tax. You're not going to get out of paying tax. My question is, what should your rate be? And you just need to be aware that you have control over what your income tax rate will be to a degree. I generally try to keep our federal income tax below, I don't know, $1,000. That's the goal, I guess. This year, I chose to pay more because I did a Roth IRA conversion where I basically, took my IRA money and made it basically a tax-free down the road. But I got to pay tax on that now. But I chose to do that. It was not a surprise on tax day. That's one of my pet peeves when people, April 15th is our tax day here in the United States. People are just worked up and foaming at the mouth, and they're all surprised at how much they owed. From my perspective, that should never be a surprise. You should be definitely in the ballpark when it comes to knowing what you're going to pay. A little planning, please, people.
Yeah, I sort of didn't, really. Like a lot of people, they always sort of complain, look at how much tax I'm paying. And as you've sort of mentioned, you can kind of control it in a way, and defer it to a later date. And it's kind of, I mean, we have a thing. I don't know if you guys have it stateside or something similar. We call it like salary sacrifice, where it kind of makes it advantageous to kind of pay for things like your pension, because it kind of it kind of lowers your national insurance and your tax. So that's quite popular. I don't know if you guys have that, but it's quite it's a lot of companies have adopted it, and it's kind of like a good way of saving for things, and making savings on your tax and national insurance.
Well, that's the first time I've ever heard that phrase, and I just wrote it down with an exclamation mark. I like that.
Yeah.
It's sometimes here people refer to it as front loading, and that's the technique we use where, so you might go take a whole paycheck.
Yeah.
My wife and I did this all the time for years. January, February, we would take like no money for our paycheck. We put it all in our retirement accounts, and then we would just divide smooth it out over the next 10 months. So just by cramming it all in there real hard for 2 months, man, we were able to save a lot of money. But we've really taken the salary sacrifice concept to the extreme. Now we kind of view our whole salary for the year as something to be put into buckets. But hey, whatever gets people to save, I'm all for it. I like this notion of salary sacrifice.
Well, what you mentioned about the front loading. So over here, like the beginning of the tax year, sort of usually around April time. So as you say, it could be the first 2 months, where you basically, as you say, putting in the whole check, and then, in order to keep getting the company match, because a lot of companies match monthly. So you would then, as you say, smooth it over the next 10 months of the year. But obviously the first 2 months you go all in sort of, and you have that funny conversation with the HR department where they're like, what are you doing, like, sort of thing.
Oh, I learned real early. I had to befriend those people in HR because they thought, what are you doing? They thought it was crazy. And I actually had one of our superintendents come up to me and he said, now what the heck are you doing? Explain what you're doing to me. And I said, well, I'm just, we're saving all our paychecks because we're going to max out all the accounts. And he goes, how much will that be for the year? I said, well, we're going to, save $75,000. That was 10 years ago we did this. And he just kind of shook his head. He says, wow, that's crazy like a fox, Yeah, but, and a lot of times be aware of those people in HR, at least here in the States, they have a lot of, authority, and maybe they really don't have it, but they can kind of put the kibosh and say, well, no, you can only do 10% or 20% of your check, because they're thinking of maybe an outdated contribution rule, because I think it used to be like that, like say around 2000. Some of these people have been there a while, and so you got to know what you're allowed to do, and just be really nice and show them the contribution limits and things like that if you have to. But I would definitely view those people as my allies. I used to, at one of my jobs when my son was born, I would take him in there and all the ladies would come and they wanted to hold him, but they always knew that I was going to come in at certain months and change my contribution rates.
Yeah, because we, at my workplace, it's like a third-party company that you can kind of go online and change your contribution, but it will only let you change it up to like 20%, or they call it 20 plus. And you usually get an email then from kind of like the staff pension team where they'll say, oh, we've noticed that you wanted to put in 20 plus. Can you give me the exact number, 25 or whatever, 30. And it's quite funny. And I got into the habit of just emailing them, like, oh, this month I want to raise it to this, or, that kind of thing. And it's the same guy all the time that I ask, and I don't know what he's thinking. He must be like, what are you doing, sort of thing, but just got to do it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that you're probably one of the few. My wife and I are probably the only ones that, and maybe the superintendent here, that max out those accounts. Now I did this past month, I did $5,200 to my 457, and I'm going to do that January to May to hit the 26,000. And then I'll do my 403B over the next 7 months. So, and my wife's doing the same. So where it's fun. It's good to be crazy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What do you think it will take for, like, I guess, people to get more interested in it? Or do you think it will always be that way? Do you think people will, you know, they're either into it or they're not, sort of, in terms of saving and, you know, for retirement, that kind of thing? Or...
Yeah, I think about this a lot because I have friends, coworkers, and family members who've made good money, many of them more money than I'll ever make in my life from work, and don't really have a lot to show for it. And very frustrating to me. You mentioned earlier about people thinking it'll all take care of itself and work itself out. Well, there is a plan set up for everybody, but what people got to realize is you're an afterthought in that plan. At best, in the States, you'll have Social Security, which, is not a lot. And, I don't want to, I'm not trying to belittle people and their decisions, but you got to take some responsibility for your future because, everyone gets a shot at your paycheck first, and then you go work for the bank to pay off your mortgage. You're not allowed to miss those, but people will shortchange themselves by not doing, 10 to 50% of their paycheck at various points in your career. You don't have to start at 50, obviously. But I sometimes view, this fire movement was really taking off, I was very enthusiastic about it, because anytime you get swept up in the zeal, I don't know, you're overly optimistic. But I think by and large, it's growing, but it's not, I don't know. The way society is set up is that, you're just taught to go to school. And here in the States, that requires a big student loan generally. And even if you don't have to get that debt, a lot of people just do it because everybody else is doing it. Then they jump into a mortgage, and then they're paying insurance premiums and credit card debt and car payments. And next thing you know, your check is spoken for. You're last in line. And people view in the States and probably most of the West, I read about the debt levels in Canada and Australia. It's high. It parallels us. If many times it's even more. People view debt as normal now.
Yeah.
And I don't view debt as normal. I have a little list of my pillars of wealth building. And my pillar number one is debt avoidance. If you can avoid debt, you have no idea what a massive leap forward that is. Now, you won't have a nice house maybe to start out with, but you're just not obligated. You can work for yourself still. But long term, people being financially independent, I don't know. I think the first step is people learning how to live within their means, not encumbered by debt. Most people would view that as incredible compared to what they're currently in. I don't know what it's like there in Scotland, but I imagine it's something similar.
Yeah, a lot of people, I had people at my workplace that, were quite new, just sort of joined the company, and they were already looking at, reducing their, pension contribution because they had so many expenses. And there was somebody that was paying ridiculous amounts of money for haircuts, £200 or something. And it's just and they had bought a brand new car that they were sort of, had financed and things like that. And it was just they were quite young. And I'm thinking to myself, they've got that advantage where they don't even really need to put away that much, or they could do, but they've got the head start, but they're just not taking advantage of it. And again, there's probably no one there to step in. And they were talking about already sort of moving out of their parents. And I'm thinking, to take advantage of living with your parents as an opportunity, maybe to pay down your debt, and then you can start thinking about moving out. But they were already thinking about getting more, deep into debt. Sort of, it just I was oh, what's happening? But yeah, generally, a lot of people kind of think. I don't say that they think it's okay, but they just fall into it. It's hard to explain. They just just, I don't know. It's
what my wife and I have this conversation all the time. That as we got ahead of the financial 8 ball, instead of living behind it where we just kind of ride the wave. And it's so liberating not to be preoccupied with money all the time. Pretty much the only time I talk about money is like on podcast or if I blog something or talk with my wife. But it's not a worry thing. It's kind of like the power of what money can do. Now, money won't solve all your problems, but it will take care of many of most of your money problems.
Sure.
But as well, we always come back to the fact that, money, if you don't manage money right, it will ruin your life.
Definitely.
That's the thing. It should be a small part of your life, but if you get it wrong, man, it ripples through everything and makes everything so much more stressful and complicated. And I lived like that for so long. I never saw someone that was financially independent that made good money decisions. That was just not how it was in my family. We had a lot of income coming in and a lot of spending going out.
Yeah.
But as far as like managing money and making it work for you and then realize, wow, we have this level of lifestyle that's really good, and then save more. That was that was incomprehensible. I never heard of anything like that. So a lot of people, a lot of friends and family, when you start kind of managing your money differently from the general populace, you're kind of an odd bird. You're out of step. And if people quickly want to, label you a cheapskate or a tightwad, or I just like not sweating money stuff anymore, So will it ever be super common? I don't think so, but I will say this. The FIRE movement, the financial independence movement, what it has done is young people that are kind of inclined to be savers, they're stumbling across some really incredible examples that are very easy to pick and choose from and imitate and replicate. They're just going to do that, and you're going to start seeing people who are 30 years old. They're going to be working on just passion projects or jumping in and out of the workforce as they please and saving all their money. They're going to have an existence that 20 years ago, no one even could imagine that. It's crazy,
It's
You're
amazing, having that freedom, I guess, so early that you could, if you weren't enjoying what you were doing, that you could just sort of have the money there to just leave sort of thing. It's just not many people are in that position where they can just, say they're going or that's it for them. And, or even the freedom to move to another location. Again, there's that fear, but also being able to do it, because a lot of people feel tied to one place, and, it'd be amazing to be able to nothing to stop you basically from doing what you want to do. So that's
the thing is that when you have a paid off house and paid off car, for example, and you've got a frugal lifestyle, it doesn't really cost that much to live probably anywhere in the world. Now I live in a one stoplight town, Statenville, Georgia. Pull it up on Google Maps, everybody. It'll blow your mind. But I'm sure that with no house payment, $2,000 a month easy, I could live on and live very well.
Sure.
But when you're going to work and having 2 cars for the professional couple and nice clothes, and man, the expenses, they just mushroom. So I think you're just going to see a lot of cool financial independent stories going forward. But I'm sure you've been in those comment sections in some of those articles and posts. People hate those stories.
Yeah.
There's always 1 trillion reasons why you could never do that, and then of course the stock market's going to go to zero, and it's going to be Mad Max time and bread lines. And I always tell people, if that's the reality, it will save me a spot in the bread line.
Yeah.
Because we're all screwed then. The last thing we're going to worry about is our portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it's a really fascinating topic because, when you don't have any money, and depending on our stage in life, we've all been in that spot, right? So it seems so mythical, and the people that have money are so smart and they're better than me. No, not at all. That's not the case. When you save money, you can join the league of the the geniuses, so to speak, because it's just saving money is just it's just a habit. It's not an intelligence thing. So that's why I say, hey, start young, start saving 10%, and boy, start increasing that, and it leads to a superpower, basically.
Definitely. I mean, I think, that's one of the most important things is to get started. And, you see people in like forums over here where they have a certain amount of money and they're just going around spending weeks and months trying to figure out what to do, what's the right thing to do. And, I would say just get started, do something with it that, you can always fix out or iron out that, if you think you've made a mistake, but just to get going. Because a lot of people just sort of like delay. And then I need to read a book, or I need to, find out more information, or, they'll listen to somebody who they think knows best and kind of wait for that, to be sure. But, I think you've kind of, it's so much easier now with the information out there, the internet and reading books, and that you can kind of figure out what you got to do. But yeah, a lot of people are putting it off. And like I mentioned earlier about, waiting until their new job or their new raise before they do anything, that they earn too little now to even begin. But you've kind of, I think it's important to start, to kind of get going with it and get used to doing it.
Well, someone that's just starting out, what they probably need to do is get on that calculator you mentioned and kind of reverse engineer their paycheck to kind of just see what it can do, and then pick that as a savings goal. And like you said, you're going to make some mistakes when you start. So start with a modest amount and keep learning. And I look back at my own case, I had an MBA, and I never really thought about money as me having money. I took an MBA to go work for a company down the road and probably make them money, but I never really envisioned myself with money because that's just not what I saw when I was, geared to pursue. So I learned more reading, like, what was it? Personal Finance for Dummies. Eric Tyson. So here I am with an MBA reading a dummies book, and it all clicked. So if you got to go to a dummies level book, grab it and read it. Swallow your pride, and then just grab a couple more basic personal finance books, and the simpler the better. Because bear in mind, there's a lot of people that want to manage your money, and they want to charge you fees to manage it, and it's to their advantage to have money being a great mystery. And as your last guest said, Lars, about what is it, Money Demystified? Once you get a simple investing plan that you understand and you can stick with, let it ride.
Yeah.
The more complexity, I don't know. The more complex something is, the bigger the fees, and the less transparency. That's been my experience here in the States.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just. Is there any other books that you would recommend that you've read? Because I've heard you quote a few books that you think are quite good to kind of get into this sort of like world. Basically, anything that you recommend?
Well, the Simple Path to Wealth by Jim Collins, was really good. It was very readable too. So for a layperson, and even though I have an MBA, I consider myself a layperson still. The other one, I remember reading some of the Bogle books, John Bogle, like Bogle on mutual funds, and my big takeaway there was when he showed how the vast majority of actively managed funds can't beat their benchmarks. And then when you figure in expenses and taxes, they get smoked by an index fund. And and it was just like, once that was the thing I took out of the book, and I realized this is not even, that's all the thinking I got to do. But I would say any of those Bogle books, the blog, there's so much in the blogosphere now. And I would say pick someone who's like, maybe your age group, someone that's got a similar I don't know, if you want to read someone your same ethnicity, your same job, there's somebody out there who's very similar to you blogging, and it's really great to see someone like you who's just kind of knocking it out of the park, dropping the hammer, as I like to say, because you just like cheat, pick their model and just copy it. Like I know as a teacher, I'm supposed to tell you, Stephen, don't cheat, stop copying. Guys, feel free to cheat, feel free to copy, because it's not, you're not sending a rocket to Pluto. Oh, yeah. Wait, that's not even a planet anymore. What am I talking about? But go out there and just read some of what people are doing, and they're doing it all over the world now, right? There's bloggers everywhere just crushing it. It's you're just going to find when you start, it's not nearly as complex as you thought it was.
Definitely.
And once you kind of, let me mention this too. Once you kind of get it going and you kind of optimize your plan, you're feeling really good about it, be aware of this, that at some point you're just going to have to let time take control. You can only push it so far. It might take 5, 10, 15 years, but that's okay. I would say at that point, enjoy the ride, enjoy your frugal lifestyle, kind of work on that a bit, maybe start learning how to use travel rewards to still take a vacation, get a hotel room, that's something we have done. We use travel rewards to go to Mexico. We use Airbnb to have long-term rentals. And, it doesn't really blow up our budget. But it's going to take a while. You're not going to go from 0 to financially independent in like 3 years. Now, some people do that, but it's okay. Just kind of work on your plan and be aware you'll pass through phases, but you will get there.
Brilliant. That's absolutely excellent. I mean, I must say that I've listened to many of your podcasts, interviews with the likes of Choose a File, Mad Scientist, and I found myself going back and re-listening to it because there's so much like gems of information, because nobody really talks so much about, kind of like pensions or things like that too much, and goes into that sort of like that, the strategy that you had, which was noticing that there's these things that you could make the most of and do pretty well from. So it's really interesting because over here, like, pensions are seen as boring, complicated, and something that you don't bother with or think about, that as it will just sort itself out. But I think you've shown that obviously they're tools, and you can do really great things with them if you just kind of apply yourself and do a bit of research.
Well, people like my mom has asked me, so what exactly do you talk about in your blog? And I said, well, it's not really that complicated. It's like the government wants you to save money for your retirement so you're not a burden in your old age. And they give you these vehicles that you can load up with money. And the deal the government says is, we won't make you pay tax on that if you put it there. Well, basically what we did is one day we just added up all those buckets, and we realized it was almost 6 figures, and now it is over 6 figures. And I thought, it was just like a lightning bolt hit me. It's like, well, why don't we just load this thing up? We have some money we can live off of. So, like I said earlier, like, you're the, Senior Born, he's so smart, our teacher. I'm like, no, it's not that. It's, I just know what I have, and I've committed to fill in the bucket. I can load it up, and that's what I've done. And you'll have your own plan. Those people listening out there, just work your little plan, and you'll tweak it along the way. And one day everybody will look at you with great, revere and say, "Wow, you're so smart." And it's usually, I'm really a 1 or 2 trick pony here, but it works. So, and everyone, personal finance, as they say, is personal. You'll come up with your own little tweaks and your own formula, and just if you do, try to pull somebody aside and bring them along, or at a minimum, try to set up your your kids, your grandkids. So that's kind of the phase I'm at now, is trying to help people right the ship. And I meet with coworkers now. Like the last Sunday, I was invited over to someone's house, and it's very interesting because as you're kind of, doing the plan on a scrap piece of paper and showing what they can do, you see kind of the light bulb going off in their head and the eyes getting wider. And they always say the same thing. I wish I met you earlier. I wish I'd known this 10 years ago. So, if you're listening to this podcast, congrats to you, because you're in the loop now,
That's great. All right. Well, thanks very much, Joey, for coming on to the Superb Diamond Range podcast. It's an honor to have you on. And like I say, you've been a big inspiration to myself and many of the listeners, I'm sure, with your strategy and your, giving the information out that's, valuable to many people. So thanks again. I appreciate you coming on.
I like to talk. I had a great time. It was my pleasure. And if any of you guys have any questions, just fire me an email and I'll answer as best I can. I'm not a financial advisor, but I love hearing success stories. So please, if I was ever able to help you, share that with me. So,
and what would you say is the best place to reach you online?
Oh, yeah. My website is millionaireeducator.com. That's one word, Millionaire Educator. And I'm on Twitter. It's ed_Mills_. And I put most of my articles when I write through that. But it's easy to find me. And sometimes I get a little bogged down because I am teaching and coaching. So if I don't answer your email right away, I'm not blowing you off. I'm just probably deep into a basketball season or teaching. So, but I'm easy to get a hold of.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thanks everybody for listening to the Superb Diamond Range podcast. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and the Twitter website, which is at Superb Diamond RA or Superb Diamond Ra. And thanks again for listening. And I hope this interview gave you plenty of value and information on, moving forward with your finances. Thanks again for listening. Peace out.